the Investor Connect podcast program. This is Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of the show, in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, private equity, family offices, and many other investor groups for startups and growth companies. I hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you for joining us. Well, hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today, we're here with Dr. Orrin Ailloni-Charas of RedCrow. Orrin, thank you for joining us.
Paul, thank you very much. I appreciate being here today to speak with you.
Great. So what was your background before investing in early stage companies?
So, that's a great question. I have an unusual journey to becoming an early stage investor. My background is really a physician. I'm a doctor. I've been in clinical practice as an anesthesiologist for 25 years. I've had a number of jobs outside of anesthesia as well, including consulting within various healthcare startups. And I also took an MBA at Columbia University in New York several years ago. So I have my feet firmly planted both in the business world and in the medical and clinical world. And so that is what brought me into the early stage environment.
Great. So tell us more about RedCrow and how it works. It's a very interesting model.
Thanks. RedCrow is a network of early healthcare startup enthusiasts, and our primary constituency are physicians and healthcare providers. But we also appeal to anyone who's interested in healthcare and innovation in that space. We have a number of business professionals and executives who are also involved. And we've built this large network. It's really the only one of its type that can curate and vet early stage startups. And so it's an ecosystem that starts with partners like the Cleveland Clinic, UCSF, Stanford, TMCX, all the marquee names of institutions where innovation comes from, the Mayo Clinic. We aggregate startups that come to us, that get referred to us, that come to us organically, and then we provide them with a multi-layered evaluation process. One is a crowd-based phenomenon where we market the companies to our network, thousands of members, and we get feedback. We push a survey out to get information validating the company and the things they're doing, looking at their social impact. And then on the next stage, we do a comprehensive and very thorough analysis of the companies. And what's unique about the RedCrow process is that we don't only look at the things that you would normally expect a company to look at: business strategies, capital risk, marketing plans, commercialization plans, of course, regulatory plans. But we can also really unpack the science. We can look at the peer-reviewed studies, the makeup of their medical advisory board, their clinical integration, their clinical trial design. And we can do that in a way that really I've not seen done by any other organization.
Well, it sounds like quite a comprehensive process, so appreciate the discussion there. So in general, what excites you right now?
What excites me is that there's a tremendous amount of innovation in healthcare. I come to this environment as a physician with a desire to help people, to make their lives better, to make them healthier. And the ability to get involved with companies that are innovating in this space, when they're successful, they're helping people at scale. I mean, it's across the board. They're not solutions for individuals. And so there have been revolutions in genomics and in immuno-oncology and in artificial intelligence and virtual reality or augmented reality, material science. All of these areas are feeding directly back into healthcare with amazing new innovations that are really changing the game. If you take immuno-oncology as an example, the path to treating cancer, many cancers today, is completely different than it was 20 years ago. And it's remarkable, and investors have an opportunity to be a part of that, not only to make a return on their investment, which of course is terrific, but more importantly, to really be a part of the engine that fuels these discoveries and their commercializations.
Well, that's great. So for our investors out there, what's your advice for them about investing in startups in the healthcare sector? What would you advise them to do before they write that first check?
Well, you have to know what you're doing. There are a lot of risks inherent in any investing, but in particular in healthcare investing. And in healthcare investing, one of the benefits, which is probably better to lead with, is that the return on investment can be very, very lucrative. We look at typically companies that can return 20 to 30x return based on the early stage of the investment. The later you get into an investment, the more de-risked it should be. That's great. But of course, the return will also be lower. We look at earlier stages, and so the risk is higher and the reward should be high. That being said, the process we've put in place is inherently meant to de-risk the investment by creating insight and transparency into the work that the company is doing. And so my advice would be, if you're not going to do it with RedCrow, which would probably be the best choice in my opinion, at least do it in a way that you know that you're seeing. You got to look under the hood. You got to really understand what the company's doing, understand what the competitive risks are, understand what the regulatory risks are, understand what the capital risks are. So don't invest alone, don't invest in a shiny new object. You really have to understand why things are important and how they're going to integrate into the clinical practice. And that's what we've done. I've had a really great experience in investing and seeing companies that have met my criteria and gone on to meet milestone after milestone increase in valuation. And so as on a personal level, I feel that I have created validation for this approach. I haven't had any exits yet for my companies, but I feel that the challenges early on have been surmounted and these companies have gone on to continue to be successful.
So on the other side of that table are startups in the healthcare sector. How do you advise them to approach their startup given the healthcare conditions?
Well, it's hard. And, you want to start with good intellectual property and protect it, whether it's through a licensing agreement or whether it's your own creation. And that's really important. Have strong patents that you can keep your competitors away. What's really interesting to me, Hall, about healthcare investing is that we have all of these barriers to entry, but each of these barriers represents also a wall of protection once you've gotten past it. So protecting your IP, getting through your regulatory requirements and your clinical trials, those are really big responsibilities for a company and they're big challenges. But once they've done that, it buffers them against any competition in a way that's really very, very valuable to them and creates valuation inflections for their investors. So my advice to the startup is really know what your plan is, know how much it's going to cost, and have a very smart working strategy to execute. My other advice would be have the best people with you, the smartest people, the key opinion leaders. Make sure you get good names working with you because they're going to give you insight and they're also going to give you credibility when you go to investors. Probably the biggest risk in many ways is the capital risk. It's hard to raise the amount of capital you need in order to execute all of these clinical trials. It's very, very expensive. So having that validation, having good partners goes a long way. And of course, as a personal plug, RedCrow can help you with a lot of the analysis and education and messaging to investors. And I think that's also very important because there are a lot of people trying to raise money and not a lot of people willing to write checks. And so you have to not only optimize your messaging to get to the largest audience possible, but you also have to optimize your messaging to rise above the din of the other startups.
Well, that's good advice. So you've been in the healthcare industry for some time. How do you see it evolving today? Where do you see it going? And what are the big changes you see coming up?
There's so many changes in healthcare, Hall, to talk about. You mentioned a couple of them earlier, the advances in genomics, the advances in immuno-oncology and understanding of the immune system and how it plays a role in cancer, evolution. Of course, artificial intelligence, computer sciences, and material sciences are all evolving quite a bit. I think that healthcare, because it touches so many parts it integrates so many things into the way we perform healthcare that there's just a tremendous amount of revolution. And because it affects so many people, the opportunity to have a blockbuster company is very prevalent. We see a lot of companies that start in a lab at an institution and become very large and important companies within several years because the need is there. But you have to identify a real need, you have to solve a real problem, and you obviously have to have competitive advantages. And if you can do that and execute well, you will most likely have a successful company.
Great. So what's your investment thesis for investing in the healthcare sector? What do you look for that you say this is going to be a winner?
That's a really great question, Hall. And I'll only speak personally now, not for RedCrow. I like to see things that are true innovations. I'm very interested both in pharma and in devices. I think they have different life cycles, so it's nice to blend the two of them. So I'm looking for innovations. I like to be in certain sectors, as you probably gleaned from this conversation. I'm very interested in immuno-oncology. I'm very interested in impact investing. And so, for instance, at RedCrow, we are partnering with various not-for-profit organizations like the March of Dimes to put together investments commercializing innovations around helping mothers and babies have better health and wellness to improve the outcomes in their medical experiences. And those are things that are very important to me. I don't think there's any one sector in particular that stands out. What I'm really looking for is a good story with a good team and a good plan for execution.
Are there any startups that fit that thesis that you can call out, one or two perhaps?
We have some interesting startups on our platform. Call your attention just randomly to the two companies that are raising money that I think that would be very interesting to look at. One of them is called Heartbeam, and that's a company that has a personal wearable. It's really in your pocket, but it's a 12 lead EKG, which is equivalent in its sensitivity and specificity to what you'll see at a hospital when you go to the emergency room. What's interesting about this company is that between its cloud-based iCardiologist and the device itself, it can really help you, the individual, diagnose a heart attack. And that's something that any current wearable that's an EKG wearable cannot do. And so it really appeals to a much different constituency than, say, the Apple Watch. The Apple Watch can look at rhythm. A LiveCore can look at rhythm. That's what they're approved for. But they can't tell you if you're having a heart attack. And I think that there is a large body of people who get discomfort in their chest, who are older cardiac patients, and their only solution is to either ignore it or go to the emergency room and get an EKG. And this offers them an alternative, which is easy and inexpensive and will create a lot of peace of mind. I think that's a really neat company. The other interesting point of that company is one of the founders of that company, a gentleman named Dr. Vidich, was also one of the co-inventors of flash memory at Intel. He had a long career at Intel. So I like that team and I like what they're doing. Another company I really like, it's a little bit earlier. They're developing a lot of their business, but have really great IP and a really interesting plan. And they've won a number of awards, as a company called Amnion Life. And they're actually creating essentially an artificial womb. And it's a product that's targeted at premature deliveries, particularly early preemies, to help them prevent temperature loss and dehydration because of the physiological parameters around the way a baby is born and their skin integrity and their ability to maintain homeostasis. I think that's really interesting and could have a tremendous impact. It is a very early company, but I think with proper guidance, it will be something very important. So those are two companies I think are super exciting, and they're both on the RedCrow platform. So anyone listening is welcome to go check them out and give us some feedback. If not, consider an investment.
Well, that's great. So we talked about the challenges startups face in this space, but if you had to drill down into the regulatory or the technical or the market challenges, what would you say the challenges that startups face today in healthcare that they may not have faced 10 years ago?
That's that they wouldn't have faced 10 years ago. So the technical risks, the regulatory risks, those all would have been there. One might argue that the regulatory risks are a little bit different because there have been changes at the FDA, but they're still pretty significant. I don't think they've changed in a material way. I would say maybe today the biggest risk is a capital risk. You have an interesting phenomenon. A lot of the early stage R&D historically was done by large companies, and we've seen a large trend of that R&D that was stopped. So your larger companies no longer do the R&D in-house, and what they've done is they've created an acquisition strategy instead of an R&D strategy. So there's definitely a market for early stage companies to go and sell themselves to those larger companies if that's their desire. That being said, it takes a lot of capital to get to the point at which you're an attractive acquisition target. And this is where the risk occurs because there aren't as many funding sources for early stage companies. So once you've gotten past your friends and family, you've tapped out your aunts and uncles and your grandparents and your parents, you need to find more institutional investors. And your traditional investors, the family office network is very hard to penetrate. And the institutional investors, they want to write large checks. You see this frequently. We're interested in you, but you're too early. It takes the same amount of work to do a $10 million investment as it does to do a $500,000 investment. It's not worth it to us to just write a $500,000 check. So, and that's aside from the issues that may come with institutional money because they're very sophisticated investors and typically take a board seat. And now you have different set of rules that may come along with running your business. RedCrow exists in order to create a different audience, an audience of individuals, high net worth individuals potentially. We currently only do accredited investing, so it's not Kickstarter. It's still sophisticated, super angel type investing. But it brings in capital in a way that one didn't have access to before. And that's pretty much thanks to the Jobs Act and the ability to create a crowdfunding platform. I would say that's probably the most important shift today is that your access to capital or the capital risk has really transformed. And that's why the opportunity for a company like RedCrow really does exist, particularly in healthcare. So I would say that's probably the biggest difference. And apparently there have been even recently a lot less foreign money coming in to the early stage startups due to some of the changes in regulations in the current administration.
I see. So you see a lot of sectors and applications out there. If you had to pick a couple of them that were leading the way as far as innovation and traction in the market, what would you pick out these days?
I think there's some really interesting innovations we've seen. I would say one of the innovations that I've been enjoying watching the unfolding of has been the transarterial valve replacement, which is called TAVR. So that now if you need to have aortic valve replacement, we can do it through your blood vessels rather than an massive open heart surgery. I think that's really interesting. There have just been so many innovations, again, going back to immuno-oncology and pharma. There have been a lot of new advances in that area. Precision medicine is a very interesting area. I think it's still evolving, as is artificial intelligence, and finding useful and important ways to integrate artificial intelligence into a clinical practice. In my mind, the best integration so far has been in diagnostics, particularly through radiological applications. But there are really just a tremendous amount of innovation. What I like to do, rather than cast a very narrow net, is cast a wide net, but look for companies that personally appeal to me in one way or another. So whether it's the science, whether it's the application, whether it's the team, that's what grabs my attention.
Well, the last few minutes that we have here today, what else should we cover that we haven't?
I think I would love to just touch on the RedCrow model in that it's modern in that it's interactive. So we utilize the social media platforms and our website to really bring people into the innovation mix. So, and we really encourage that. We want everyone, whether you are an investor or just somebody who's interested. And maybe that's because you or your family has been touched by a particular ailment or situation, or maybe it's just because you're curious. We feel that bringing in people's opinions, providing feedback, especially feedback en masse to companies, is very, very valuable to the companies. It's essentially like a giant ongoing and fluid focus group for the startups. And we look at the process as a 3-step process. The first step is an analytical process where we really try to gain insight and educate the company. The second stage is a messaging stage where we help them with their messaging and we educate their potential investing public. And then the third stage is the stage at which we promote them to our network and through our social media platform to hopefully help them gain investment. And more participation is better because we get more information for them to consider the startups. And so, yeah, I would just encourage people to come to the website, sign up for our newsletter, join us at the American Medical Association. We have a specialty hub on the American Medical Association Physicians Innovation Network site run by the AMA and partnered with the AMA. So just join us and be a part of the conversation.
Well, that's great. Well, how best for listeners to get back in touch with you?
Well, you can certainly reach out to me directly. My email is Orrin, ORRIN, @redcrow.com, or you can go to the site and check me out there, and we would love to have your participation. Also, you can join the AMA Physicians Innovation Network. You don't have to be an AMA member. You don't have to be a physician, and it doesn't cost anything. But you can certainly sign up and be a part of the conversation there, and just give feedback to companies. They want to hear from us. So let's give them all the feedback we can.
Well, that's great. We'll put that in the show notes. Thank you for joining us today and hope to have you back for a follow-up soon.
Thank you. Oh, it's been a pleasure, and I really appreciate this. And thank you to your listeners.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Paul T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early-stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.